From UFOs to psychic powers and government conspiracies, history is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know. A production of iHeartRadio.
Hello, welcome back to the show. My name is Matt. Our colleague Noel is away right now, but he will return shortly.
They call me Ben. We are joined, as always, with our super producer, Alexis, codename Doc Holliday Jackson. Most importantly, you are you. You are here. And that makes this the stuff they don't want you to know. We had a fantastic conversation just a few seconds ago off air, and it was concerned with several amazing, several horrifying things. Matt, you and I have those moments sometimes where we're in the middle of something really compelling, and then we have this, beat me on this, Doc, we have this, we got to go do the actual show moment, right? Like we... yeah.
Let me tell you a story, everybody. Ooh. So, okay. So I'm in the middle of a table read for a different secret project that you'll hear about shortly. And Ben messages Alexis and I, just a quick little thing. Hey, the Russian number stations are going nuts, and provides a link to a place where I know we have monitored this situation before. And there is some stuff going down, and all of the work that you're doing just feels not so important when the Russian number stations are going nuts.
Yeah. I didn't mean to be like a jerk about it. But
no,
I
you
did
weren't.
follow up with a snarky line. It was like, Matt, you asked me, can we confirm this? And Alexis is like, what is going on? And then I just followed up with, I guess we got to do our little show. And so, so number stations, we were talking about this, longtime listeners, fellow conspiracy realists. If you understand Tradecraft, you understand the ingenious method of communication that number stations employ. This is not a conversation about number stations today necessarily. However, if you would like to hear number stations, you can find them online, because the nature of the mechanism, it's just objectively brilliant. Long story short, old school Soviet stuff using one-time codes, which means that it does not matter if you hear something, if you don't understand the signifiers and the language, even the music that gets broadcast sometimes, you will have no way to decode the message being sent. So what we know is that someone in Russia in control of some of these stations put out a call, and we don't know what it means. And we are recording this a week in advance, which means maybe we'll find out where that call was going and what it meant. We are super
hopefully
fun
we
at parties.
don't.
Hopefully we don't. Hopefully we don't. Hopefully it was someone saying, check the oven or something,
For sure. Yeah. And today is Tuesday, March 1st, by the way, as we're recording this. The good thing is, while we're dealing with that existential dread, that feeling that is just tearing away at all of us, there are things to keep us occupied that make me personally very happy. And we're not sponsored by Bandai Namco. I think that's who put it out. But
From Software.
It is From Software. They literally just made the same game again and called it something else. But there is such thing as Elden Ring.
I think Alexis and I are big fans. We had an earlier conversation and we wrapped recording. And one of the things I just said, knowing you two are prolific and talented gamers, I just looked at the camera and just said the two words, Elden Ring. And then you both, I don't think you planned it, but you both went, oh, and then we we spent some time like looking at the different classes, looking at how to set it up. And I had never played Dark Souls before. And I was asking why it's so hard, why there is no explanation for the stuff you're supposed to do. That's too much like real life for me. You know, I got real life problems as well. But it's cool.
Wait, so you're not enjoying it?
Enjoy is a word that encompasses a lot of things. I would say I'm experiencing Elden Ring. I am committed to the bit, right? Like Matt, you earlier asked me, you were like, well, if you're unhappy with the character you made, why don't you just change it and start over? And I was like, no, it's too deep. I got the sunk cost fallacy. I already, I like killed a goblin. You know what I mean? I'm in it. I got to be this person now. And Doc, I think you also hopped on the train, and I think Matt will join us soon. But we put the call out to you, Matt. We need a tank.
Oh yeah, I will for sure do that. Alexis, what did you start out with as your class?
I'm an astrologer. And let me say for the record that I was already planning on buying Elden Ring. I just didn't think I was going to have time to play it this week. But then once we were talking about it yesterday, I was like, beat me, future Doc. It, I'm buying it now. So I went to GameStop, bought it, and so far, I don't want to use the word addicted because that's a very strong word, but I definitely found myself working today. Even now, as much as I love you guys, like there's just still a part of me right now that's like,
thinking about them runes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Souls, runes, as you guys pointed out. Yeah, and also our again, one of the few regrets I have about our show is that a lot of our conversations take place off air. We have had explorations of real and ongoing deep-seated issues in civilization in the US and abroad. We're talking about video games because that is, for us, I think it's safe to say for the three of us, that is a way to take a break from a news cycle, take a break from propaganda, the war being waged against transparency in the historical record. Anytime someone is objecting to the concept of, what's the buzzword? CRT, right? The acronym for critical race theory. We talk about this stuff. We explore it together. We explore it with you tuning in. And then at some point we go, oh, man, I don't know. Let's play like a video game or something. Let's be cooler.
Mm-hmm.
Let's not freak out. But we are at a freak out moment. I looked at the doomsday clock. You remember that, Matt, Alexis? Yeah, I looked at the doomsday clock and it's always almost midnight. It's the worst. But
what's it at right now?
Man,
I haven't checked it.
On air. All right, let's do it. So while you're looking it up, Matt, brief explanation of what the doomsday clock is. The doomsday clock is a kind of a thought experiment. It's an analogy of an analog clock, if anybody remembers those, that counts down the likelihood of a nuclear weapon exchange. And currently it's, I think it's pretty close. It's like a minute and a half away from midnight. Midnight is when the bombs drop.
Yeah, it says 100 seconds to midnight. And that was updated on January 20th, 2022. So recent events haven't been taken into account yet.
Yeah. Yep. The doomsday clock is not a scientific measurement necessarily in terms of methodology, but it is important to understand that MAD, mutually assured destruction, aka the unofficial standoff that keeps world civilizations from being at each other's throats all the time, MAD is looking increasingly less consistent at this point. And again, we are recording, as you said, Matt, on March 1st. This episode is publishing on March 10th. We do not know what will occur in the interim. But we do know one thing, and it's this. You are the most important part of the show. It makes our week to be lucky enough to share your stories with your fellow conspiracy realists. We did maybe the best way to start today. Also, I played astrologer in Elden Ring, and I'm super pissed about it. I made the wrong decision. But the
best thing about that game is that you learn by failing, right? So you inch forward in the game in progression by failing and dying. So by restarting and just going back to the beginning, you're going to know everything you got to do, where all the items are hidden, all the places you got to go. I'm just saying it's a rewarding experience.
So basically he said the real runes are the friends that you make along the way.
Yes.
Wow. Oh, so good.
Also, Alexis and Matt are way better at video games than I am. It's just sort of a known thing behind the curtain of this show. We have something really interesting that we wanted to open with today. You will recall, fellow conspiracy realist, in a previous listener mail segment, we received a fascinating story that recounted an anomalous occurrence of sonic booms in New Mexico. And we walked through some of the physics of how a sonic boom occurs. We walked through some of the causes. We also asked you for help. We asked you to weigh in with an explanation, plausible, possible, thought experiment, what have you. And we received some answers. What are those answers? We'll tell you after a word from our sponsor.
And we're back. We are turning to a message we received from someone calling themselves K. Just the letter K. I really like this person. I don't know anything about them, but I like them a lot. You will understand why momentarily. This is an email, so I'm going to read it like this. Gentlemen, love the podcast. Funny enough, a buddy of mine at No Such Agency, wink, yes, that one, just turned me onto your podcast, since we both enjoy conspiracy theories, but also like to fact check just about everything we hear called a conspiracy. So yeah, love the show. Anyways, on to the purpose of this communication. The first part is about your latest listener mail segment on sonic booms. From my experience as a combat controller, which involves a bit of air traffic control thrown into it, sonic booms randomly heard are nothing to worry about, unless there are more than two in a row. Yeah, I recall that Noel had a question about that in our listener mail segment. Going back to the email. See, the thing about the U.S. military, God, love it. See, the thing about the U.S. military.
This is a very well-written correspondence, by the way.
Yes. See, the thing about the U.S. military and the U.S. airspace, there are a lot, and I mean a lot, of special use airspace, particularly in the Southwest United States, but spread throughout the U.S. And Ben, we talked pretty extensively about special use airspace, or at least you talked about that in the last episode. Airspace that is restricted to normal flights that you would probably be able to access. You listening, maybe not Ben. I don't know if you could access some of the special use stuff. I'm going to pretend that you can, because it makes
this is not part of the email.
No, it's not. I'm sorry.
But this is an important point. Just to pause here. Kay is absolutely correct. And also, there's nothing inherently sinister nor nefarious about special use airspace. Picture any crowded traffic area. Everybody has one in your town. What I think we're saying here is, Kay, if I'm understanding this correctly, what we're seeing is that there's a lot of stuff in the air. And if there is not some sort of system of guidelines, parameters, constraints, then those things in the air might hit each other. So it makes sense to have stuff cordoned off. I just want to establish that's not necessarily conspiratorial. It's important,
no,
right?
Yes. That's why we have the Federal Aviation Administration. They help with that stuff. And Kay sent us over to a definition of special use airspace by the FAA, and I'll just it's kind of a government definition
super
of something.
sexy
I'm going to read
language.
it to you.
Oh, it's like BuzzFeed. Yeah. No, it's important though. It's important. We got to do it.
Okay, here it is. Special use airspace, or SUA, consists of that airspace wherein activities must be confined because of their nature, or wherein limitations are imposed upon aircraft operations that are not part of those activities, or both. Oh, that's not confusing. Okay. SUA areas are depicted on aeronautical charts, except for controlled firing areas, or CFA. Also temporary military operations areas, MOA, and temporary restricted areas. There's so much stuff that Kay sent us. I want to talk about some of those things, but let's continue with the email, I think. And this is Kay. Also, I'm including an attachment of the MOA's military operation area around Tucson, that's Tucson, Arizona, so you can see just how crowded the airspace is over there. These things are everywhere throughout the US, and some of them are approved for supersonic flight. This is most likely what people are hearing, talking about the sonic booms, and it should be noted that air temperature, dew point, and cloud layers also affect the speed of sound and how loud it is and where it can be heard from.
Mm-hmm.
Now, maybe we should just take a moment here, Ben, and describe what Kay sent us?
Yeah.
So Kay sent us a very large PDF that had a ton of information in it. And I cannot stress to you how much information was included in this PDF. I'm not going to read you what the title was, just because I feel like that might, I don't know. Ben, I think we leave that blank there.
Yeah.
But it has a lot of information about airspace around the Tucson area and some military operations. And I took a screenshot of one of these pages, Ben, that we're looking at right now. And it says training airspace near Tucson International Airspace. And it's like an overview map of really the Phoenix area, the Tucson area. And I mean, it goes like Yuma is on the far western side. And what's on the far eastern side? I don't even know what some of the stuff is over there. It's the New Mexico-Arizona border, essentially, on the eastern side of the map. And there are numerous boxes, like, well, what do you call those? Polygons? No, they're not polygons. Rhombuses and other shapes that are outlining specific airspace and calling them different things like Ruby, Tombstone, Jackal, Outlaw, really interesting code names, I guess, of some sort. And they all are just representing different special airspace. And now back to the email from Kay. Kay says, now, those paying attention would have noticed that I said they are nothing to worry about unless there is more than two.
Meaning
which during the last... Yes, sonic booms. Which during the last podcast mentioned there were 4. I reached out to a few people, that would have this information around that area. Now, I can't disclose who they are, also why I am only going by K, but there was an incident that occurred during the time frame in question for an unmanned aircraft that descended through the atmosphere. Yes, that descended through the atmosphere at a steep angle, passing through multiple different air layers, each of which had differing temperatures and air pressure, which caused multiple sonic booms over a large area. Reports of them reached as far as Denver, Colorado. I'm not sure what the aircraft is, most likely a Skunkworks type spacecraft prototype being tested, but I couldn't get that information. Considering the tests that have always been done in that area of the country, I wouldn't be surprised. Ben, what?
Yeah, it's true. It's all true. Everything so far is accurate, and also raising important points that we did not hit in our previous listener mail. So what we're hearing from Kay, to unpack this briefly, is that yes, there is active testing of craft that is not necessarily public explicitly acknowledged at this point. Keep in mind that is a necessity of the testing and R&D process. Also, as we said earlier, there's no real way to hide a sonic boom, right? And I think this is an excellent point, Kay. I think also it's really important to point out that this means there was a testing situation, which is way better than the alternative. The alternative of something just going nuts out there in the sky, way scarier. Way scary. At least there's someone at the figurative wheel. You know what I mean?
Well, but there's no one at that aircraft's wheel, right?
That's why we said figurative. Yeah, that's why we said figurative. But this is interesting because Kay goes on to communicate with you, fellow conspiracy realists, and explain why Kay is reaching out with this information. Also, I get the feeling, Kay, that you are not necessarily active on a bunch of public social media, which I understand. I think you do too.
Mm-hmm. Fully. Kay continues, to be fair, I wouldn't normally reach out with this, but considering this aircraft had another incident a while back that caused the shutdown of the U.S. airspace, I'm sure you remember that from a while back, I figured it would be worth mentioning it to you all. Do you remember when we mentioned that on the show? Like, oh yeah, U.S. airspace just got shut down and nobody said anything about what it was.
Yeah.
And it finishes with, love the show, Kay.
Yeah, this is something extraordinary and profound, to be quite honest, folks. This is confirmation of a thing from people in the know. And what this means is that, big boy, from earlier, there is an explanation. Dude, yes, it sounds like there is verified testing, off mic, off air. Kay has bona fides, and Kay knows what Kay is talking about here. We can say now, with a measure of certitude, that what you heard, big boy, in New Mexico, those sonic booms, that series of sonic booms, we can say that people have confirmed the cause, right? People have built a very solid case explaining the cause of those sonic booms. And also, what I took from this, Matt, is that sort of testing will continue. For years, you and I were speculating on, what was it? X-35B?
X-37B.
X-37B. Yeah. What's it doing up there, right? It's an unmanned spacecraft, which is neat, I think, objectively.
It is super neat, but it looks a lot like a space shuttle, and it is not supersonic. And you know what is supersonic, Ben? Kay, I wonder if you can send us some kind of message to confirm, or maybe you can't confirm or deny, but I have a feeling it has something to do with exosonic. I remember seeing an article in Aerospace Manufacturing about an uncrewed supersonic test vehicle, basically, that was going into the testing phases last year around October. Maybe it's this. Maybe it's something even cooler or scarier. I guess you definitely can't confirm or deny it if it's scarier.
Yeah. And this is somewhat unrelated, but I feel like Kay will find this enjoyable. The statement, I can neither confirm nor deny, it has such an interesting origin story, and we figured out what it was. Yeah. So I always love that. I always wish that we could do some of those state level actions as individuals in one's personal life. For instance, sanctioning people. You can't do that as a person. You can't be like, I sanction you. We talked about that on a sanctions episode where unfortunately we were correct. And again, we talked about some unintended consequences. We talked about whether or not sanctions function as collective punishment. But we're grateful for the correspondence we received regarding sanctions, and especially grateful for Kay's correspondence here, because it is a solid explanation. It's confirmed in terms of the legitimacy. Now, to be clear, Kay is not saying that Kay flew in an experimental aircraft themselves.
No.
Kay is just coming from a place of expertise and saying to our fellow listeners, this is probably what it was. And I love it, Matt. I love that every so often you get a solid explanation for something.
From somebody who's like, hey, my friend at no such agency, which is the NSA, by the way, if you're just, if you missed that, my friend over at the NSA, just, let me know.
Give me a hot tip.
Like, Kay, how did you contact that person? Like, that's what I want to know. What comms channel do you feel is safe enough to just even ask a small question that doesn't even matter necessarily?
Yeah, well, maybe that's a story for another day, but I think we filed this one as a win. And like the next thing we have to think about when we hear these explanations, when they are credible, when they are verified, our next question is, what does that mean for the future? So if Big Boy is hearing some other series of sonic booms, then does that mean testing is simply continuing? Maybe if you are located in certain other sensitive inland regions of the U.S., maybe you have heard a series of inexplicable sounds from the sky. That's probably what they mean. That's probably where you're hearing it from.
Yep, and we actually got several voicemails in, Ben, that we haven't talked about yet, but from places like Tampa and other parts of the country that experienced sonic booms right around that same period. So I'm just, and some other weird sounds too, like a pretty consistent train noise level sound that was very low frequency that was heard overhead for an extended period of time.
So like some elder god going choo choo. Or what?
Yeah, just like that.
Just good. Like that. Okay, good. We got there. Awesome. Go us.
Again, we can't thank you enough, Kay. We'll be right back with more messages from you.
And we have returned. There's something that we wanted to bring attention to. It comes to us by way of our fellow listener, Anthony. Anthony says, "Hi guys, love the show. The topic of the Tulsa bombing has been a topic lately with both HBO's Watchmen and with Lovecraft Country. However, it's rarely discussed that Tulsa was one of over a dozen towns destroyed during the Red Summer. Have you guys done an episode on the Red Summer? Multiple seemingly successful African-American communities were destroyed, erased from history, and replaced just after World War I. Since this topic is not regularly addressed in most of our history classes, I think this would qualify as something they don't want us to know." And Anthony, you did something awesome and something that I think we very much appreciate, Matt and Doc and I. You re-pinged us on this. We do read every email we get. We are especially fortunate that you brought this back up to our attention. So Lovecraft Country, have you guys seen that? Have you guys seen that show?
Mm-hmm.
Lovecraft Country is an adaptation of an excellent fiction novel written by a guy called Matt Ruff, because that's his name. So Lovecraft Country explores a fascinating intersection between Lovecraftian horror and the real life historical horror of the United States in the Green Book years. And when people saw HBO's Watchmen, right, there's also a big central plot point. This is not a spoiler, but a big central plot point is the Tulsa massacre. And candidly, many people in the U.S. were not aware of the Tulsa massacre before they saw Watchmen. And Anthony's absolutely correct, Matt. It's not something that textbook publishers are super excited to talk about. You know what I mean? They don't want to be honest about history sometimes.
Well, I'll be honest with you. I thought they were creating a fictional occurrence for the show, the extent of it, like what they showed on screen. And of course, it was a fictional version of the Tulsa Massacre. But to me, it was like watching Watchmen really did. It was like it changed my understanding of it. And it made me reread stuff that I hadn't looked at in years about the massacre itself. I'm really glad we're talking about it right now.
Yeah, let's outline it. So the Tulsa Massacre is the best known instance of tremendous violence. And it is only one example of a pattern, quite disturbing pattern. Domestic terrorist, white supremacist, attacked African-American communities and did so to a large degree with impunity. They did not face the consequences of their actions. You can, to the credit of the U.S. today, you can go to the National Archives. Go to archives.gov. It's out there. It's a Google search away. You can read about what is called the Red Summer. And it is crucial. It is mission critical for us to emphasize that this did not occur in a vacuum. This did not occur to one town. This occurred throughout the United States. There was what was called a spike in violence, racially motivated. And a lot of it, to be honest with you, a lot of it was directed against veterans, at Black veterans from the U.S. who fought for a country that did not treat them as people. And they survived. They came back from World War I. And when these individuals were in Europe, they encountered a more equal world than the world in which they were born. And so, despite the fact that these veterans, these individuals, literally put their lives on the line and survived and came back, they were targeted by domestic terrorists. I mean, that's the name for white supremacists. You can dress it up however you want, but those are actions of domestic terrorism. And history is much closer than a lot of people would like to imagine. You know what I mean? And I know, Matt, Doc, there are people in our audience today who were alive during similar incidents. Yes, of course, you're going to get a sanitized version of history in your textbooks, right? You're going to get the highlights, the go us, the attaboys. But if you do not acknowledge the terrible things that happened, and I know this sounds like a broken record, that's a meta reference. You are doomed to repeat them, just like a broken record. The most violent incident occurred in Arkansas, in Elaine, Arkansas. Over 100 people were murdered. There is no other word for it. There was no accidental, there was no act of arson that accidentally hurt people. They were targeted and murdered. And it's honestly, man, it's unclean that this is not talked about more often. And I know that on this show, we strive for transparency. We strive to discover the present, like to dig deeper behind the headlines. We strive to understand the possibilities of the future. And that is not possible without acknowledging the truth of the past. Does that make sense? Thanks for coming to my TED Talk. Anyway, here's Wonderwall. I yield my time.
Yeah, I just don't know what to say, Ben. When you think about, our conversation surrounding critical race theory, and then you look at the actions that were taken during the Tulsa massacre, and you look at the Greenwood district there in Tulsa, Oklahoma, destroying the center of wealth, really. One of the major centers of wealth, one of the most prosperous places in the United States for the Black community. And it's a rough thing to read about, just that it was possible to burn, 36 blocks.
So the reason I think Anthony's point is so important here is because if you are hearing this, you need to realize that sort of thing is not distant. This is not an academic point. These events very much like them, can recur. We mentioned the doomsday clock at the top of today's episode. I want to give a special shout out to our old pal, Robert Evans, the mastermind of an excellent series called It Could Happen Here. Please do check it out if you have yet to listen. But I want to emphasize, too, the dangers posed not by grandiose statements or what have you, but the dangers posed by banality, the dangers posed by people who sit back and just say everything's fine, like that dog, or everybody knows that meme. The weird, even more disturbing thing about the Red Summer is that, yes, it happened across the country. Yes, it was indiscriminate. Yes, they were murdering people. It was largely a terrorist activity waged by other veterans, which everyone who is a veteran in the audience today, you are well aware that you are supposed to have each other's back, right? You are supposed to have an understanding and a mutual respect. You know what I mean? I mean, there are tons of jokes about the Air Force, right? The Army, the Air Force, the Marines, the Navy, they all love, cracking jokes about each other. But when the rubber hits the road, when the sonic booms hit the air, you are supposed to have the backs of your coworkers. And you're supposed to put the mission first. And the mission, really, for several centuries, on paper, has been to make the U.S. a better, more equitable place. That did not happen here. As a matter of fact, just over a century ago, people who put their lives on the line for the idea of the great American experiment were targeted. And they were not assisted by the government, the same government they almost died for. They were not assisted by the local community structure. And I do not mean to sound sanctimonious. I do not mean to sound self-righteous, but this is in danger of becoming the stuff they don't want you to know. And it shouldn't be, because again, you cannot move to the future unless you have a full awareness of the past. And the damage done by Red Summer remains with the United States today. It is intergenerational damage. It is intergenerational trauma, intergenerational economic damage. These people were not compensated. They were not helped in any shape, form, or fashion. And this is quickly becoming the stuff they don't want you to know. And we cannot, as a country, make any sort of forward progress unless we as a country are transparent about the past. And, this sort of stuff is not the thing that you often see on the news, right? Like, let's remember, of course, earlier during the pandemic, Uncle Sam came out and said, aliens are real. And then the world collectively said, cool story, bro, but I got a lot of stuff going on. And it's easy to forget these things, but they should not be forgotten. I know this is not the best way maybe to end our show today. And for that, honestly, I'm glad. It should be uncomfortable.
It's weird. And I think that's also just sort of like indicative of the entire point, that it's an uncomfortable thing for people to talk about. I feel like people talk about other things in history with a level of comfort that they don't feel talking about this stuff. And I think that that's indicative of something. I don't know exactly what I would say it's indicative of, but it's a manifestation or it's demonstrative of something.
I agree. So thank you very, very much to Anthony and Kay and From Software. Those are the three people we're going to thank today. No, but seriously, Anthony and Kay, thank you so much for writing into us and just sharing with us information that we wouldn't have without you. You make us smarter and enrich everybody who listens to the show. If you want to be like Anthony and Kay, you can also find us online. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, where we are Conspiracy Stuff. If you check out Instagram, we are Conspiracy Stuff Show. It is a good time to make sure you are following all of those channels, or at least your favorite one. You should do that. We implore you to do that. As you're hearing this, something very important will be announced in just a few days, maybe a day. Oh, it's happening very soon. So prepare yourselves, get ready for the message.
And speaking of messages, if you would like to send your own message while you're waiting for one from us, you have the agency to do so. We would love to hear from you. All you have to do is pick up your phone, as Matt always says when he's giving me a hard time for not liking phone calls. Oh, Ben, are you going to use your phone for the purpose it was intended? You can do so. You can call us 1-833-STDWYTK. You'll hear a message telling you you're in the right place, and then you will have 3 minutes. Those 3 minutes are your own. They belong to you. Go nuts. Be honest. All we ask is that you give us permission to use your name and or voice on the air. Give yourself a cool moniker. It always makes our day. Tell us what's on your mind. And perhaps most importantly, do not edit yourself. If you have a story that is in-depth, if you have something you need to share with your fellow conspiracy realists, and it needs more than 3 minutes, write it out to us. We read every single email we get. All you have to do is drop us a line. We are
conspiracy@iheartradio.com. Stuff They Don't Want You to Know is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.